Go. Good afternoon, folks. Here I am again, back to see you nice folks, get some more information. And I have some information, and I'll talk to you about information toward the end of our session today. What I want to talk about to some degree is extrasensory perception. There's several other words that are used in there, like, there's ghost hunting, there's telepathy, there's psychokinesis, there's moving things around, there's bending spoons, and there's all kinds of stuff like that go on. The research shows that for the most part, this isn't a very good area to experiment with, because the results are not that good. In other words, there's a very small statistical margin, and statistical margins are important. Statistics are important, and it's not true that you can prove anything with statistics. It's true that if you properly apply statistics, you can generally find out what your hypothesis is leading to. The E.S.P. that is, incidentally, they're all bunched into talking about E.S.P. These days. The one that is most researched, perhaps, and there are some results, is telepathy. And so that continues to be a thing that gets researched. J.B. Ryan and another Ryan did a lot of work with that in the early years of extrasensory perception. And you might consider that today is even the early years of extrasensory perception, because we don't know very much about anything when it comes to that. There are some organizations and some people who tend to say that they can demonstrate the techniques to a person of how to do things like OBs, out-of-body projections, and that's a whole nother matter. But as telepathy, I was going to bring some cards and I can't find them, but I'll get them and I'll show you what those cards look like. And one person is in one place and another person is out of touch with the person that's doing the cards, and the results are whatever degree of hit that they come up with. And some of them are good and some of them are not so good. But extrasensory perception is a very difficult problem. A lot of scientists just say, oh, that's a bunch of bunk. And for instance, a very, very good scientist from Cambridge who passed on, I believe, said something about there is no afterlife. Well, there's a couple millions of people that would disagree with that, and there is some evidence that I wonder what he's saying now. So not to be any way disrespectful, because he was a very fine man with a very hard problem. And so anyway, that's some of what's going on. There are books in your probably library, and although I tend to find that libraries are kind of short of books about parapsychology and manuals, journals be kind of short in parapsychology. And anyway, I'm going to go on to the next thing to talk about. Excuse me for a second here. Okay. Anyway, I'm going to get those cards. I'll find them, and one way or another, and I'll show them to you. And we might even do a little fun experiments or something like that, you know?
Why don't you have a seat, Dad? So
right.
Instead of going off of that subject, let's stay on that subject and talk about ESP.
To the extent that I know anything.
To the
about
extent that you know anything, do you believe that mothers and
you
children
said believe.
believe?
That's a whole different thing than do you know? Okay.
Okay, so
Go
let's
ahead.
talk about that. If knowing and believing are two different things,
I think so.
and what's the difference? What makes the biggest difference? Knowing is
Knowing is that you're certain within yourself that it is true. And that there any amount of proving of a hypothesis about that is that it shows that it is true. Yeah.
and believing.
Believing is well, I think that's there too, except that it's like some of those things seem to be founded on ideas like there's a couple million people believe it, so it must be true. And remember, we talked about the four ways of
Knowing.
knowing, and two of them are most of what the occult stays on, including religion, and because the dictionary says, you know, it's anything you get that is kind of not for sure, you know. Yeah. So,
So
and as Spock says, oh, excuse me, we've seen in some programs like that and so on, is that there's a difference between belief and true, being truthful, you know, and positive results. And so you get into an area of how do you talk about that and how do you sustain it, you know.
yeah. So you had mentioned last week, we had talked a little bit, you had mentioned instinctual things, you know, there were certain instincts.
Yeah?
Do instincts and ESP in the human, do they almost run like side by side? Because like sometimes somebody will say something and you knew they were going to say that.
Yeah.
Is that ESP or is that instinctual?
That's probably neither one.
Neither one. What is it?
Well, it could be, you'd have to look at it in a very explicit way, and that's, is there some way that this could be explained other than either ESP or you know, like the animals, instinctual. I'll give that to the animals, though. You know, they do. They operate by instinct. If they didn't, they wouldn't survive. Not at all. Nor would we. We have some instincts. Now, there are some biologists that would probably argue with that, but we have some or we wouldn't have survived.
Sure.
We've come quite a ways, you know. But that would be due to instinct. And then after our brains got big enough to do some thinking, as it were, then they would get into other things, like they create a civilization, and they learn from each other, and pretty soon there's a language in there, and they learn a little bit about writing, then they learn a lot more about writing, and then they learn so much about writing it drives you nuts. You know, it's like one of the things I talked about was Enoch and the early books of the Bible, and what they would say is that there's enough law. There's plenty of law. We got lots of law. If people would just follow the law, it'd be cool.
We wouldn't have to make more laws for the laws
have
to
to
get
make
broken.
more laws. So you get a book like that, and then you get a whole shelf of books. And this country's on the precedent law. That means if it was ruled one way before, it could possibly be ruled the same situation now, except I wouldn't go like to say, well, it was thrown out. Well, it was thrown out before, but that's not what a good lawyer would do. Anyway, he'd say, well, we're going to change that. See?
Yeah.
But if it's already there, it's a precedent, it's English, and so we do that.
Mothers have an instinct. We're doing a Mother's Day month that we've been doing on our social media thing. And mothers have an instinct that sometimes they know something is going on before the kid tells them. Is that ESP or is that instinctual?
What do you want to call it?
I don't know. I'm curious because sometimes I do know what that kid is going to say to me or how that kid is going to react.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that is just
What do you think it is?
I would, for me,
Yeah?
I'm not sure. I guess probably I would think it's probably instinctual, but I don't think it is. I think it's probably the other.
It's both. It's instinctual to begin with, and that's why our children are outside of the womb and so on, and they begin to develop, and there is the mothers, they can sort out a baby's cry out of a bunch of babies.
Yeah.
They've shown that, and it's like a sheep or animals can sort the cry of their babies is different from other babies.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked them once, and they said that would be good. Yeah.
Damn.
That's something I want to talk a little bit about, and that is that we've talked about 4 ways of knowing, but you should always question everything, and then when you question something, you look it up and find out the best answer that you can. If it's of significance to you, if it's not significant to you, forget about it. But it's important to look it up, because to just go with the crowd is no good. We get all kinds of reporters do that. They go with the crowd,
Right.
and all this great big stuff going on, and things that seem like, well, they're a priori. That again means that it's obvious. It's why would you even question whether or not it was true, because it's obvious. That's a priori stuff. And then you get to the experimental stuff, and that's where you find out what the truth is. In science, now a whole lot of things are called science that aren't science necessarily, and that's into the occult. That goes in there, and it goes into regular stuff too. Advertising on TV, a lot of that stuff may not be true. You don't know what is true. You're not going to take it home and check it out.
Right.
Does it taste good or not? What? You rely on some people that have checked it out to be true and to be safe and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm drifting.
No, it's good.
Yeah.
It's good stuff. So I think we'll do another one of these question sessions. I like these. Do you like doing these?
Sure.
Yeah. So if any of you have any questions for the Ivan, please shoot him an email. It's ivan.fraser, right?
Yeah.
@gmail.com.
Yep. That's it.
And then he'll be here fast and furious again next week.
Yep. So long.